coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning.
Hello everybody and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast, our 50th. We've made it to the half century, which is very exciting. And what a nice way to do it. Back from the international break, we had, I think it's fair to say, some trepidation about the game that we were coming back from the international break with, the derby against Spurs, but we won, in case you hadn't noticed. I'm sure you have. Arsenal 2, Spurs 0, a fairly comprehensive and comfortable performance. For various reasons I will touch on later, I wasn't able to see any of it until much after the event, but I'm glad to say my two co-podders can fill me in there. So we have Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hello. Yeah, it was not a great weekend to miss for you. Maybe there's a correlation between your absence and the team's performance.
This would be a problem. We've looked into these things before. I wouldn't like that to be the case. I'm going to put it down to one-off. If it happens again, of course, then I'll take that in mind. Matt has struggled through a weekend of broken boilers and colds to be here, so we
again, there could be a correlation between that, and I'm willing to be selfless and suffer more if it means we get that, because so far this weekend we've obviously had the win, Pulis being sacked, Arsenal's Twitter account taking on the whole of sports journalism on Twitter.
Yes.
It's been enjoyable.
It has. We'll touch on some of those things later. But we also have a man, of course, who was actually in the ground and can tell us a bit more about what that was like. Pete, hello, Pete.
Hello, Matt. And yeah, my correlation is that I actually got to the stadium early enough to have a beer in the stadium, and I'm not going to be doing that again.
Just because it was so expensive or terrible, or that's not the way you normally do things?
Mostly the expense and the fact that it was Carlsberg.
Oh, well, fair enough. Well, let's move on quickly. We'll get that horrid taste out of our mental mouth, if that makes sense. Right, so there we are. I wasn't there because for the one day of the year I have to go to a work thing on the Saturday, and it's actually an event I quite like doing. I committed to it months ago, so I couldn't really change it. So I was fearful yet hopeful, and well, it turned out to be justified. Let's start then with a review of that game. So, team news first. Now, the team news, I think, probably pleasing to all of us. It was the Sanchez, Lacazette, Ozil three up front. Where should we start? Let's start with Pete, as you were there. It must have been a nice. You're pleased with that, with the lineup?
I was very pleased, particularly as I managed to guess it all in advance of the game. So I was very pleased to see I was 100% right, and that I hadn't tried to guess the subs bench, which I would have got 100% wrong.
Oh, well, there we go. But yes, I remember now the many happy hours we used to spend guessing the team in the pub beforehand, and people say we're not exciting. It's outrageous, but that's good. I must admit, I was pleased, but I was also pleased at the other end of the pitch as well, because I know there was talk about Mertesacker playing. I was quite pleased in the end that it was Mustafi who came in. I like Mertesacker a lot, but I just wondered if he wasn't perhaps quite the most mobile of people we could have had in this situation, given the team we were playing. Matt, any thoughts about that or anything else? The front three as well.
Yeah, I was really happy with the team. Good to see us playing defenders at the back again, now that they're fully fit. And yeah, only for the second time, our front three. I thought Wenger might have been tempted to play Welbeck straight away. He seems to favour him in big games with his work rate and things like that. But no, I was really happy with the team. I guess the only real decision was whether to play Wilshere, but he stuck with the midfield we've seen for most of the season. And yeah, I was fine, I think.
Yep. Okay. And I'm relying on you two a little bit, because whilst I have caught up now, I haven't seen it in detail as I normally would. But everything I've read has said pretty much the same thing, particularly we'll stick with the first half for the moment. Arsenal were completely in charge. Now, we know there are some issues around the goals, which we'll come to. I don't think we particularly care about those, but we should probably mention them. But Pete, again, I was able to dip in and out of it just a little bit, and the atmosphere sounded pretty good to me. Reasonably confident. Well, a good first half, should we say, from the team. A fabulous first half, to quote Graham Souness, in fact.
Absolutely fantastic, yeah. And the atmosphere was really good right from the start as well. And it was really nice to feel that as you walked in, and everyone was really up for it. And it almost seemed that Tottenham had walked into it thinking they could just come and turn us over. And as Wenger said before the game, we're not underdogs for this. And although, I think most people were fairly pessimistic about this before the game, when you got into the stadium, no one felt like they were feeling pessimistic about it. Everyone was really up for it. And the team showed that. I think they got on the back of it. And as you say, they managed that game from beginning to end, and even though I think the possession stats show us having a bit less than Spuds, but we just controlled it from beginning to end and never let them have a sniff.
Yeah, I believe the stats do show exactly that. Although the ones I'm looking at don't, perhaps on purpose, don't actually mention it. But I'll look at that. I'll look at that later. Matt, thoughts on the sort of first half in general before we come to the goals in a second?
Yeah, it was great. We pressed them high from the start, which was really good to see. Pressed well as a team. All of the front three put in a really, really good shift. And there was one favourite moment. I was watching the game with a Tottenham fan. He was halfway through telling me how strong Dembele was and how he doesn't lose the ball. And no sooner had he finished, Ozil nonchalantly jogs over and just shrugged Dembele off the ball. And it typified Ozil's performance. He was so good. But the whole team sort of followed with him. And the whole team, they were backing each other up in the way they pressed. Usually we've seen Sanchez sort of by himself pressing defenders and everyone else sort of standing still behind him, but we were at Tottenham from the start and they really couldn't deal with it. They had to go long time and time again in the first half, and Kane wasn't winning anything against Koscielny or Mustafi, so it was a dominant first half, and I think we got the tactics spot on.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I would expect. I was expecting to hear, because that's what a lot of the reports have said. Pete, your point about the possession. It's in the first half it was pretty even, but Spurs were ahead 53-47. In the second half it was 63-37 to Spurs, and overall that was 42-58. It shows that possession doesn't always win you games, which of course we've been on the other side of quite a lot. So yeah, it's an interesting observation there.
With their possession, they did absolutely nothing. Basically,
of course,
nothing.
It's where the possession is, isn't it, and how impactful they are with it. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of stuff about how Spurs were not really there, but let's not worry about that. Let's focus on the goals now. At the moment, because the two goals, of course, were scored within 6 minutes, and at that particular moment, I had my phone in my pocket and I was talking to 200 people at the point. So all I could hear was buzzing in my pocket. I didn't know if it was good news, bad news. It may have been not even football related. It could have been my horse running, or whatever it was. So the moment I finished speaking and was able to sort of surreptitiously have a look, I saw it was 2-0. It's fantastic. Now, of course, I didn't know at the time. There had been a little bit of controversy about the goals. So where should we start with these? Well, Matt, let's start with you. Your thoughts on both of the goals. The first one, I don't really go for offside on either of them, to be honest. I think that's so close it's not really relevant. But the free kick, of course, was at issue for the first goal.
Yeah, probably.
We can be magnanimous about it now, but yeah.
Yeah, Mike Dean was always going to have his box office moment to get involved. It was probably a harsh decision. I think Dean said their Sanchez had pulled our Sanchez back. He hadn't really, but could have gone either way. I think people probably made too much of it. Yeah, Eric Dyer came out afterwards and said, "It's a shame such a big game was determined by a refereeing decision." I mean, it was like he hadn't watched the game, because we were so dominant. It really made little difference. Had it been the other way around, obviously we wouldn't be happy, but we got lucky with it. I can, again, as you said, don't particularly care about the offside. We've had so many of them against us this season. Nice to have one to go for us. And then the second goal, I don't think that was offside at all. I know some people have moaned about it, but his hand was offside, so that doesn't really count. Good ball across from Lacazette. Sanchez did well to just about control it and smash it home. I think 2-0 was more than deserving of our first half performance.
Yeah, that's certainly and that seemed to be the case everyone was saying. I mean, I was able to catch up a little bit at half time when there was a break in my proceedings, as it were, and I heard Gary Neville say that Arsenal were bullying Spurs, which was fantastic to hear. Very different to what he said previously. As I said, Souness used the word fabulous, and there was lots of other good stuff. Phil Neville, I heard later on the drive home, was being equally sort of nice about us. Pete, I happen to know where you sit, of course, and you would have had a pretty good view, just occurred to me, for both of those offsides, or not offsides. Did you have any smidgen of doubt, or didn't you care, or were you were happily pleased just to celebrate the goals?
I couldn't care less about them, and they apparently they had just enough controversy about them to just make them even better, in my opinion. And for the Sanchez foul, I was screaming for him to have a yellow card. That might not have been fair, but the Sanchez versus Sanchez matchup was the story of the game. I thought it just went on and on throughout the game in kind of every area of the pitch as well. It was an amazing duel that they had, and sometimes sometimes the call is going to be for you, and sometimes it's going to be against you, and I think we say this when it happens to us as well, or I try to, which is, even if you get the bad decision on the free kick, you've got to defend it, haven't you? And Spurs didn't. They were Mustafi's goal was magnificent, and that header was absolute. As you know, where we sit, we were right behind that, and it was just a beautiful view of it looping up, and yep, that's on its way. And just so nicely finished that I couldn't care less whether it was offside or a free kick or not.
Something else, which again I don't think we'll care particularly about. I when I was watching the highlights at half time between my sessions, I was able to see that both the goals. I'm glad to say, I thought Lloris was perhaps slightly at fault for the second one. He seemed to sort of be there and then all of a sudden not be there.
He leant back, didn't he, and let the ball go over the top of his face, as far as I can see.
I mean, and again, I very much don't care about that, but I just thought that was worth noting. And to be fair, the stuff I've seen on Twitter and what other places from Spurs fans, they seem to appreciate. Yeah, we're a bit irritated about some of the decisions, but ultimately the better team won. I mean, they perhaps haven't put it quite like that, but I think that was the gist of a lot of the stuff I've seen. So let's move into the second half then. Matt, was there anything much to report? As we've seen from the stats, Spurs had more of the ball, but Arsenal were pretty much in control, weren't they, for the rest of the game?
Yeah, we saw out the game really well. They had a lot of possession, but they did really very little with it. I think there were an increasing number of yellow cards. Some of them harsh. I think Mustafi got one for winning the ball, which didn't make sense, and then Kane got one for flying through an Arsenal defender. But they had some half chances, and Cech made a pretty decent save towards the end.
He did, didn't he? Yeah, that was a good save.
We were in complete control, really. We could have had a couple more goals on the break, and when they took Kane and Ali off, I think that was pretty symptomatic of the way it was going, and then realising the game was gone. And we saw it out really well, which was almost as good to see as the dominant first half, to see us look so composed when sitting out a lead, because we were never really in any danger of not winning it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to have been received as a pretty much excellent all-round performance. Pete, anything of note in that second half? Matt mentioned that save from Cech, which was great. Anything else to note?
I made him man of the match for that save.
So generous of you.
Well, it was a magnificent save, and it does. If it goes in, we're going to get very worried and nervous, and things could change dramatically. So I really do think it was a wonderful effort from him, and fantastic stuff all round. But the main thing I remember about the second half was just a feeling of general ease and no great worries. Normally you'd feel pretty distracted and concerned, but no, it was fine, and we had some nice opportunities for some rather splendid chance. And what else happened? We had the Lacazette Coquelin substitution, which we predict. I'm sure everyone would have predicted Lacazette being taken off on 70 minutes. And for once, it actually made sense. I think. I mean, it got an enormously bad reaction. There was lots of booing, but for once, I thought that made complete sense and did really. It needed doing and worked really well. And there was also one other thing I noticed, which I don't know if you've seen this or felt this, but we are rubbish at breakaways, aren't we? We just because we had 3 or 4, at least 3 good breakaway chances in that second half and couldn't finish any of them. And I think that's been partly the story of the season, that although we seem to play quite well, when we're playing on the break, we just can't seem to finish them, and it's a bit of a worry in some ways.
It's an interesting point. I didn't see enough of it to comment on that. But it's it's something you want to be a bit more clinical, don't you? And that's I mean, we can get away with it on that game on Saturday, which is lovely to be in that position. But yes, you're right. It's the kind of thing we want to watch out for, and the kind of thing that we do suffer from on occasions as well. The Watford game springs to mind. I think last season, they had a couple of breakaways, didn't they, which gave them goals. So that's the kind of thing we need to improve on. All right then. Well, a lovely coast through the second half. One more thing then on this. Either of you want to? We'll start with Matt on this. Note any individual performances. Ozil got a lot of press afterwards for all his work. So I think he's a given. And him or anything really. You'd like to note about any individual performances, Matt?
I think Mustafi and Koscielny, probably Mustafi in particular, they were so dominant in the air. Which was important because Tottenham, their only real tactic seemed to be to lump it long. They dealt with it really, really well. A couple of great last-ditch slide tackles and blocks from Mustafi to keep Kane at bay. And, our defence has been very shaky at times. And Mustafi, he's been criticised for diving in too much. And he's come under a fair bit of criticism. But this was his first game back from injury. And he was so impressive. He really was. Made a huge difference. And while obviously we want to see that front three in as many games as possible going forward, if we can have a settled backline, Koscielny, Mustafi and Monreal, who continues putting really solid performances, I think that's just as important, because I don't think we'll come to the predictions, you did. I don't think many of us saw us keeping a clean sheet, but we did pretty easily in the end.
Before the game, I hadn't even realised this. Before the game, Spurs and Arsenal had scored exactly the same number of goals in the league, which didn't seem right to me. I thought Spurs scored more, but Arsenal had conceded 16 to Spurs' 7, and obviously that's changed now. And so the point you make about the defence is very pertinent, I think. Pete, anything else to say on any individual performances? You've noted Cech as a man of the match for a good save. Anything else?
Not anything that hasn't already been mentioned, I don't think. I mean, Ozil, the difference was he was doing all kinds of things other than his normal stuff. He was getting stuck in, and long may that continue, but I doubt it will. But it was generally a great team performance, wasn't it? So, as Matt says, the defence were brilliant, and just a really good team performance, and if they can do that every week, we'll be well set.
Well, I'm not going to be negative about all this, but that's something that's what you've said something there. It's something I was going to note, just so we've noted it, that apart from all the praise Arsenal got, there was this other thing about how it's so frustrating they can't do that every week. And I think we'll note that and say no more about it. The other thing, of course, that came up a lot before the game was this kind of how the power shift in North London, blah blah blah, is moving to Spurs, and ultimately that might be correct, but we're not going to talk about that now because we'll mention it briefly in a second. But we've managed to delay that a little bit, perhaps, which is nice. So all right, well let's leave the game for the moment, and we'll move on to the next bit, which is a quick look at everything else that happened. Well, everything else that happened was that all the other teams in the top 6 won. United, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, all won with varying degrees of comfort. So all that means is that Man City are almost in a league of their own on 34. United 26, Chelsea 25, Spurs 23, us and Liverpool, and indeed Burnley, I should mention, on 22. Particularly pertinent for us, of course, because we play Burnley next week. Now, that's our brief Premier League review, but we would be remiss of us, and Matt mentioned this before we even started, not to mention that today we bid farewell, probably only temporarily, to Tony Pulis, who's been turfed out of West Brom. Matt, anything you'd like to add about that?
Oh, what a shame. He leaves behind him a blaze of dreadful, dreadful football, which I'm sure he'll be hired again in February by a failing Premier League team. I'm sure he won't struggle for another job. But my sympathy for West Brom is limited, especially as I see Sam Allardyce is being lined up as the replacement. I feel sorry for the fans because it must have been such a relief to finally get rid of Pulis and look forward to maybe some exciting football, a change in style, and instead you have Sam Allardyce. That's a really miserable existence, but glad to see Pulis go, and hopefully he won't be back anytime soon.
It's the same names on the merry-go-round, isn't it? So Allardyce is going to get mentioned. He didn't apparently click with Everton over the last couple of weeks, but he's going to be somewhere, isn't he? They both are before too long. The Wales job's obviously available as now, so that might be of interest to people as well. The other thing you mentioned, Matt, was the Arsenal Twitter account going for it somewhat, shall we say, after the game because of the things I alluded to. I read two, and I'm sure there were more articles about the power moving from Arsenal to Spurs in North London. Anything you'd like to bring up on that particular subject?
Yeah, I thought it all got a bit ridiculous. This journalist wrote an article for attention, pretty provocative. He did a combined 11 just with Tottenham players and saying how it's a complete power shift and there's a huge golfing class between the team. You can't write an article for attention and then when you get attention you say that's too much attention, I didn't want that kind of attention. And then obviously he had all sorts of journalists flocking to his side, saying that Arsenal have a responsibility, and this obviously not to condone any of the abuse. That's obviously not acceptable. And if the journalists had put their attention on the individuals who abused him, I think everyone would have supported that. But it was the fact that they're blaming Arsenal's Twitter account for what followed. I think really all a bit very weak from the person to start with. I think nobody really would have paid it any attention. It was vaguely amusing from Arsenal's account. You sort of scroll past and think nothing of it, but it's been blown up into a huge thing. I think everyone probably needs to get a bit of a grip.
Yes, much like West Ham fans stopping, which need to be told to not ring 999, which has been the story today, which I haven't quite believed, but I've heard it on more than one occasion. West Ham fans, I assume in an attempt to be amusing, to complain about the quality of the play. So there we go. Pete, any thoughts on Pulis or anything else before we move on to the predictions?
Pulis, hasn't he always been a bit rubbish against us? I can't remember. With Stoke he did all right, didn't he? Anyway, who cares?
Yes.
The other one, it was the Daily Mail, wasn't it? So
it was.
What a terrible shame.
Well, fair enough. Well, let's move on then to the Prediction League. The predictions and the Prediction League. Only the one result, and I got it bang on. I said Arsenal would win 2-0. I have no idea where that came from. No points for Matt who had a draw, and Pete gets a point for saying Arsenal would win. He thought our defence would concede a goal though, so there's a problem, Pete. That's where you fell down. So all that means it's got a bit tighter. Matt's on 13, I'm on 12, Pete's on 11. So it's all very close. We have two games this week to look at. The first is on Thursday, 6 o'clock. UK time in the Europa League. We are away at Cologne. Now Arsenal, of course, have already qualified for the next round. We can wrap up top place in the group. I still haven't worked out if this matters or not particularly, but let's assume it does to some degree. Where should we go first? Let's go for Pete. So can we have a line or two and a prediction, please, Pete, on the Cologne game?
On the Cologne game, right. Well, I don't think you can possibly judge this without knowing anything about who we're going to play. I imagine it will be, our Europa League games have been all over the place so far, haven't they? And I think we only need a draw to secure top spot, don't we?
I think so, looking at the table, yeah.
And I kind of wonder if it will be for that. I mean, Cologne are obviously going to be up for trying to win it because they need to, don't they, to have any chance of catching up with Red Star. But I think I suspect we're going to win this. And I think it'll be 2-1.
2-1, okay. 2-1 to Arsenal, yes, you were saying. All right, which is what you said for the last Europa League game. There we go. Matt, what do you think about this one?
Just in terms of coming top, I did look this up the other day. So the 12, obviously the group winners become seeded, as do the 4 best teams coming from the Champions League.
Okay.
And then the 12 runners-up, and then the other Champions League teams, obviously unseeded. So there is some use, it looks like, to
well, there
come
you go.
top.
You've shamed us with your research, but that's good work. So we can all, well done. We can all benefit.
It's the first time for everything.
Thank you.
I think it'll be a similar team to we've seen so far. I think we will be on a high from Saturday. I will go for 2-0 Arsenal.
2-0 Arsenal. Okay, I'm going for 1-1 on the basis that we may not be completely, 100% up for this one, given the situation. Given even if we don't get anything from this game, we've got the home game to come against Bate. I think what Pete alluded to about who's actually going to be playing, I think is a good point. So yeah, I've gone sort of a safe 1-1. I'd like us to win, but I'm sort of trying to play the percentage a bit and think maybe it'll just be one of those things. Cologne haven't been very good either, to be frank. So yeah, maybe them being at home isn't really a massive advantage. But okay, that's good. Then on Sunday, 2:00, we are away at Burnley, who we of course are level in the league with. They've had as good a season as we have, I suppose you can argue on that basis. Yeah, they're not going to be an easy team to beat. I'll give I've gone for 2-0 to Arsenal on the basis that if we can play like we did against Spurs, even if Spurs were a little disappointing as far as their fans are concerned, I would hope that, and obviously Burnley have had a pretty decent start to the season, I'd hope we would have enough to have a 2-0 win. So that's what I've gone for. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is going to be really tough, actually. Last year, we just about scraped to win in the last second with a pretty dodgy goal. As you said, Burnley doing well this season. Haven't conceded many goals, I don't think. The challenge, I guess, is for our players to be up for it as much as they were against Tottenham, and that won't be easy. But it would be such a horrendous feeling if we followed up Saturday by not winning against Burnley. I think we will win. I will go 1-0 Arsenal.
1-0 to the Arsenal, their classic scoreline. Burnley have only actually scored 12 goals to our 22, but they've only conceded 9 to our 17. Just in the league, those figures are. We actually have exactly the same. Oh no, we don't. I'm looking at the wrong line there. Sorry, we've conceded 16 and scored 22. Right, I'm going to start that again. I made a complete mess of that. Look at the wrong line. We have scored 22 and conceded 16. They have only scored 12, but have only conceded 9. So not much action at either end of the pitch for them. Pete, what do you think?
It is going to be a tough game, and it's an away game, and we haven't won away all season. I'm tempted to go for a draw, but I just can't bring myself to do it.
We did beat Everton.
Terrible.
We did beat Everton away in the league, just to, if that helps.
Oh, we did, yes. Yeah, we did. But I will go for 2-1 again to Arsenal.
2-1 to Arsenal. So we're all going for a win, but with varying degrees of confidence. All right then, great. Well, we'll leave that there then. I think that's us done. Lovely to have come back for the international break with a win. We will be back next week with comments on that Cologne and Burnley games, and then looking ahead to some other games we've got the following week. But for the moment then, I will say, Pete, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Matt. Have a good one.
Thank you. And Matt, thank you very much, and hope you feel a bit better soon.
Thank you. I've been holding in a coughing fit for the last half an hour, so I think we should finish now.
That's another sacrifice you made for the cause. That's marvellous.
Yeah.
And well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and we'll speak to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.